to see his face.
I had to tell him to get you up. I sit on that.
harmless media.
Can you hear me now?
You want me to test? I can hear you.
want to welcome everyone here tonight to Mountaintop Church. We may have a few more people strolling in. We have a number of people online tonight, various churches. We have a few churches that are Zooming in tonight, so we want to greet everyone very, very warmly tonight. Welcome to Mountaintop Church. We are very grateful that Community Abolition Network is doing this teaching on human trafficking. As you know, there's certification that can be had through this. And any questions, you can check with any of our people. They can help you, walk you through that process. So we are so glad to be here. As a church, we take this very, very seriously. We know that Scripture tells us that Jesus Christ came to set the captive free. And we believe it's spiritually free from sin, but also temporally free. And we know there are so many people in this world who are being held captive, and we're going to be seeing that tonight. We don't want to have our eyes open sometimes with what we see, but we need to open our eyes, because if we can't detect it, how will we ever deter it? And so we are so glad that we can do this. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Mandy Leverett, who is the head overcan, and she'll be our speaker tonight. But I would like to open up in prayer. Dear Father, we thank you so much that you have set us free through the blood of Jesus Christ. And Lord, I thank you that we here in this place tonight, Lord God, can help others, Lord, to see others who are in bondage, Lord God, others who may be being held captive, and Father, be part of that process, Lord, of setting them free. So Lord, I pray for understanding tonight. Lord, I pray for efficacy to come from this teaching tonight. And it's my prayer, Lord God, that through this, many will be set free. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. I'd like to introduce Mandy Leverett to you.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. If you want to let that video roll.
You just take a seat.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm Mary, by the way.
I'm Miriam tonight.
Tonight, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Don't mind the giant microphone above your head.
I'll try not to.
There are 3 photos in front of you. If you could just pick one, it doesn't really matter which one it is, and show that one to us.
All right.
Could you describe her to us?
She looks youthful.
I feel like this is one of those situations where if I say he's 23, then he's actually going to be 16.
Hispanic, maybe not full, but part. Similar to me, actually.
Well, I mean, she's young, so probably has a lot of things to look forward to.
I would describe him as friendly.
She looks, I don't know, happy. She doesn't look shy, but confident.
Anything she puts her mind to, she could achieve.
We actually have his story, if you could read that out loud to us.
Okay, Marcus. I grew up really close to my parents. Adriana. I grew up with my brother and sister.
Amy. I remember watching the Olympics on TV when I was 5 and being totally in awe of the sprinters.
I was the middle child and easily the quietest.
I felt like no one ever saw me or cared.
Dad was too drunk to keep a job, and he never even saw me unless I was in his way.
Mom worked 2 jobs to make sure we had food for every meal, so she was never here to know when he would hit us.
One day when I went to the mall, like I like to do to be out of the house, a man came up to me and told me I was beautiful and asked me on a date.
On our first date, he drove me around in his car and said we could eat whatever I wanted.
Every time we were together, he bought me something new.
Tom really cared about me, and Tom really made me feel special.
I was in love with him.
After only going out for 3 weeks, Tom offered me a way out of my home, asked me to move in with him.
So when he asked me to have sex with him, I did.
He would put his hand over my face until I couldn't breathe.
Tom had friends over pretty regularly, and I could tell that some of his friends were into me.
So I kept my door locked and hoped that no one would bother me.
After a few nights of crashing there, he said that I still owed him for letting me stay at his place.
He said he had a friend who wanted to spend an hour with me.
He told me I might have to do some stuff, but not to worry about it. It's not a big deal.
When I didn't want to, he slapped me and said no one ever cared about me like he did.
But I didn't know what else to do because I needed a place to stay.
His friends forced themselves on me and took turns while he watched.
One by one, they come down to the basement, telling me how pretty I am.
When they're on top of me, I just close my eyes and pretend I'm running.
I'm exhausted and I don't know what to do.
My name is Adriana, I'm 16 years old.
My name is Marcus, I'm 14 years old. My name is Amy. I'm 12 years old.
I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That was very different than what I thought.
Especially because, like, being a girl and imagining, like, if that was me, like, that's, I don't even know. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
She deserves to be a kid, just like what she is in this picture.
It being so close to home is something that makes me want to jump out of this chair.
I wouldn't think that Grand Rapids is a place where anything like this would ever happen.
Because you don't want it to happen to anybody, and you really don't want it to happen to people that live where you live.
Thank you for sharing her story with us. I'd like to show you something if you wouldn't mind taking her picture and following me to the gym.
Oh, wow.
This is representation of the number of children trafficked at any given time. In West Michigan alone.
I expected something certainly a lot smaller.
Bar graphs and numbers, but these are actual people.
I don't know, in like my world, in my bubble or whatever, we don't talk about this. It's not something you think about.
You know, what we see is only on the surface.
I mean, looking at this, sex trafficking doesn't have any discrimination, that's for sure. Ages, genders, can affect anybody.
It hits you right in your heart, your gut, your stomach. It's like, wow. Now it's like I feel like I have this weight of responsibility to see how I can help.
Changes through greater awareness and making people realize that this does happen here and will continue to happen until we decide to make it stop.
That is the National Human Trafficking Hotline number and text. What if I told you that the greatest weapon we have to combat human trafficking is you? Would you believe me? Those aren't my words. Those are the words of a former attorney general who brought his state from a failing anti-trafficking state to an A state. And those are his words, because he recognized no matter how many law enforcement specialists they have, they could not do what you can do. They cannot see what you see. And I raise it one bar. I say, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon you. He's anointed. For those of you who know Christ as your Savior, He's anointed you to set captives free, like Pastor Matt was saying earlier. This is the problem in our generation. This is our modern day slavery, and we are the solution. In fact, that's why CAN exists. We've packed 35 years experience of doing anti-trafficking, community-based anti-trafficking, to help equip other people, other professionals to do the same. So what we do is we retrofit what's already there, what you do within your profession, the community you already engage. And where nothing exists, we work collaboratively with best practice organizations to create that. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. This is one example of that. Isn't it a beautiful place to heal? In 2016 in New Jersey, we worked with Hoving Home and a number of other organizations to make this a reality. Because though they had served the state of New Jersey for over 50 years, a lot of the victims that were being rescued off the streets couldn't leave the state because of parole or custody issues. So this is a resource we need survivors to have access to in every state. And together, we're helping build those resources and get existing quality resources identified as well. By the way, they get over an 80% success rate for victims of human trafficking, for addiction recovery of all kinds. This is a resource you don't have to have insurance to attend. It is a remarkable resource that has been built by volunteers, by people that work, professionals of all kinds, and then also people who donate. Not many organizations donate, but a lot of individuals donate to make programs like this a reality. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. So people often ask how it started for me. Like I mentioned, 35 years ago, I had already survived a lot of the kinds of trauma that the victims of human trafficking that we serve do. And from there, in this picture here, I'm a suicidal 12-year-old kid. And in that picture, I'm living in in the valley of Mount Rainier in Washington State, and that's literally the Glacier Water River. And I'm being baptized, but what's interesting there is I experienced from going from suicide to overcoming deep-seated trauma, and I knew if that could happen for me, that could happen for anyone. I didn't know that just yards from that location and months from that moment lived the first victim of human trafficking I would assist. So when I say it happens anywhere, this is a rural community. It really does happen anywhere. Please turn to the next slide. In fact, in the Bible, if you can be a person of faith or not of faith, but it's interesting in the Bible, every time, without exception, when a group of people or an individual led people out of slavery or prevented it in the first place, they were diverse. They were young, old, male, female. They were widows and teenagers. They were Israeli, non-Israeli, but they had one thing in common. God used what was in their hand at the time. And for most of them, it was the tools of their trades. So that is what we're here today to talk about. In fact, we've got panels of experts that are joining us from all over the country to talk about how we have together used the tools of our trades to be part of building a comprehensive response to local human trafficking. Go ahead and turn to the next slide. So what does human trafficking look like? Now, our organization, CAN, mobilizes on 6 categories of human trafficking, modern-day slavery. Today, I'm only going to talk about the 2 that are covered under the federal law. So just by raise of hands, and those of you that are in different locations, you can raise your hands as well. How many of you have actually heard about human trafficking? A lot of us. There have been movies put out over the decades. There have been a lot of information. Some of it has given us a false understanding of what human trafficking is, and some has actually helped us. And so I just wanted to, if you can see this list well, this is an inquiry. And the question is true or false. Human trafficking happens only when? Only to the undocumented. Not true. Every single one of these are not true. They're all false. In fact, 83% of the victims of human trafficking in the United States today are our own citizens. And for most of them, it started between the ages of 11 to 14. So that's 5th grade to 9th grade. Now, there are a lot of stats put out there, but I only quote the things that ring true with the service provision that we've done over the years, and I would say that is true. The fact of the matter is we don't know the full impact of what's happening at the border, so we don't know how that is. We know it's affecting our foster care, which is a vulnerable situation. We had testimony in Congress this past year. So we don't know the full impact of what's happening as a result, but we wanted to dispel the myth that it only happens to people outside of America or it only happens to foreign nationals. It really can happen to anyone, anywhere. And in fact, people think, well, you know, an American kid with a cell phone knows to call 911, so clearly they're safe. The fact of the matter is the cell phone becomes a control device. Often, because the trafficker uses it to track, to text, to create meetups for those that they have groomed and lured and entrapped. The chains often aren't physical, but they are often mental, and that usually takes a grooming process. And what it looks like is removing someone from their support system. And then the pressure begins. It looks like abuse, 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 and a moment of kindness. Sleep deprivation, starvation, and a hamburger. So the trafficker isn't just the source of bad, but the source of good. If you want to eat today, if you want to sleep today, then you better do what they say. Then trust forms and loyalty forms, and even a twisted codependent kind of love forms. And so those chains are stronger than any other chains that you think of physically. In fact, we see a lot of imagery in anti-trafficking with chains, that it gives an incorrect idea that there's physical chains involved. There have been isolated cases, but for the most part, it's not. Another misunderstanding is that it's really easy to identify. It's not. There are a lot of victims that don't know what is happening to them is human trafficking. In fact, we've had people in our recovery home come in for addiction recovery and learn later that they were a victim of human trafficking. So that's why we need to know what it looks like, that we can respond appropriately and safely within our professions, because we are the eyes and the ears everywhere. So another idea that is just wrong is that it's mostly foreign national. I want to say that there are so many resources available to those that are undocumented who are victims of human trafficking. We have TV visas set aside every year that go unused specific to this population. The national hotline number is connected to law enforcement specialists. Some of them you're going to hear from today. And service provision identified in every state and U.S. territory. You can leave your tips anonymously. You can use that nonprofit hotline that's federally funded to get help. There are a lot of different ways you can use it to your choosing. And so it's a resource for you. So another idea is that awareness of human trafficking will somehow rob a child of their innocence. The opposite is true. Children, youth that have been made aware that I have helped train, have identified human trafficking, created additional resources, helped prevent attempts of traffickers on them, their friends, and their family. So students, you're going to hear from one student in a little bit who have helped pave the way within their public school, within higher education, and in academic studies. It is remarkable what people can do right where they are. We've had high school students be the change factor to get government, federal legislators to change their mind. Not even able to vote yet, but they were the factor. So there is no age where you can't make a difference now in this topic. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the commercial exploitation of an individual by the use of force, fraud, or coercion. By commercial, it has to be the exchange of money, goods, or services. So people think, oh, we didn't exchange money, so it's not human trafficking. And also, when it comes to prosecuting human trafficking, one of those force, fraud, or coercion have to be proven. So sometimes we'll find that a trafficker or a purchaser will be prosecuted under different statutes because there isn't enough evidence to prosecute under the human trafficking statute. But where there is, we're seeing an uptick. We're seeing continued graduation. We're having some survivors. Most survivors never testify against their trafficker. So a lot of times, the evidence that they do have, they can put toward other charges that they can mount up to be basically around the same jail sentence as a human trafficking case. So never look at, well, how many cases in my county or my state of human trafficking. Don't look at that as an indicator of the impact of human trafficking locally, because most never go through that. We're working to change that. You'll hear from leaders in that topic soon, but it's important for us to understand what the law says. And then this has to be proven in every case except for minors and sex trafficking. Force, fraud, and coercion do not have to be proven in that situation. Go ahead and turn to the next slide. So let's talk about what it looks like. Human trafficking comes into two categories within the federal law: sex and labor. They are throughout legal and illegal industries. So the first one we're going to talk about today is labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is the #1 form of human trafficking globally. In the US, it's second to sex trafficking. And there's a really cool website. I don't know if you guys can see it where you are, but it says slaveryfootprint.org. And it's an inquiry. And it asks you a bunch of questions, and then when it's finished, it lets you know how many slaves you have working for you. Did you know you have slaves working for you? In fact, the top 2 crops tied to child slavery globally are coffee and chocolate. How many of you enjoy either of those? How many of you enjoy them daily? So this inquiry is not put there to condemn us, but to challenge us to get that number down. And we come at this issue in a multi-pronged approach, and one is through consumer awareness. Now, if you go to the grocery store and you've got one bar of chocolate or one brand of coffee next to another, and one has a little green logo that says Fair Trade Certified, and they're roughly the same price, and you know what that sign means, you can easily choose the one that is fair trade. And that has caused the market to go in the right direction. In fact, today, I think most states have the discount store grocery store called Aldi's. Aldi's has their own bag of fair trade coffee at a very fair price. Because again, the supply and demand is creating greater demand because we're voting with our dollars, and it is leading to the freedom of other people. So it's not just in the supply chain of coffee and chocolate, which right here in Hackettstown is the headquarters of what? Of what? Right, Mars. So you've got your M&Ms and your, right? And we're not too far from Hershey, Pennsylvania, right? So we're kind of the Americana chocolate hub of the world. And again, the slavery isn't happening in America, but in the supply chain. Where are they getting that chocolate? There are some stores, for example, the number 1 purchaser of fair trade coffee is Starbucks, but they're still not 100% compliant. And so they look for the different kinds. Dunkin' Donuts, 2018, their regular coffee is not compliant, but their espressos in 2018 were reported as 100% compliant because the customer is saying, hey, can we make that fair trade? I know right here in this church, they make fair trade coffee available in the back. So you can do that. You can make that simple choice. But it's not just in those 2 crops, but it's still in cotton. It's still in what we mine for our cell phones and our vehicles and all kinds of things. And so, but as we are going in the right direction, things are changing. But it's also in the workforce in America. It looks like a Midwest poultry farm. It looks like a California nursing home. It looks like a South Jersey tomato farm. It looks like a Connecticut live-in home par. It looks like a contractor. So it looks like a lot of everyday life, including restaurants. In fact, in that picture to the upper right, or the left, your left, you can see that there is someone doing nails. It can be the person that's doing the nails that is being labor trafficked, and it also can be the person sitting getting their nails done that is being sex trafficked, and the trafficker is paying for her to get her nails done. So you see how in everyday ways this can pop up, and if we notice the difference, we can make a difference, right? In fact, there was a case in Newark, New Jersey of a braiding salon that was run by teenagers that were labor trafficked from African nations. So it really can look like everyday, everywhere life, but it takes us to take that second look to really make a difference. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. The second category we're going to talk about today is sex trafficking. It's probably what you've heard about most. And in fact, it intersects all kinds of professions. In fact, the one area that is so saturated as part of the whole cycle is pornography. Pornography, the vast majority of pornography available today is what we call slave porn. The people in the images weren't free when they were made. And then it's also the number 1 tool that traffickers and pedophiles use to lure and groom their victims. So, and then it also creates a thought pattern, a way of thinking about humans in real life that objectifies them. There was a Princeton study done in the last 10 years that proved this. And it's interesting that within violent offense incarceration, the number 1 thing they have in common is that there is an addiction to pornography. Now, doesn't it make sense that if you're going to violently hurt people, that rape, murder, whatever, that you have to look at them as an object. If you want to have a clear conscience, if you want to sleep well. And that's exactly what happens when you're saturated and addicted to pornography. And it also, porn addiction, I think it's something like 30 plus states have declared porn addiction a health crisis. What happens when there's an insatiable need for more and more and more? Demand goes up. So this is one area that's part of that full cycle, but again, it's in a lot of places. In fact, truck stops are hubs for human trafficking. And every year, the National Human Trafficking Hotline number puts out a report. And if you've seen it, it's a picture, it's a map of the United States. And oftentimes people draw false conclusions because the calls, they're measuring the calls as little pings. And so a state like New Jersey is lit up like a Christmas tree, where Montana might not even have one little dot. It doesn't mean there's not human trafficking happening in Montana. It means the calls are happening in these different locations. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because we know every state has truck stops, and every truck stop we see human trafficking happening there. So one of the organizations that have helped create industry standards is Truckers Against Trafficking. And they've gone state by state to require for those seeking CDL licenses to go through a human trafficking training. And so what they have done is, oftentimes if you're stopping at a truck stop, oftentimes you'll hear a little rap on the door. A trucker might just take a picture of the car license plate that just dropped those kids off or dropped those women off and text it to that national hotline number. And they've become heroes across the nation just doing their job. It's kind of like Superman, right? Under his day suit, right? He had his super suit, and that's what we're building. We're building an army of everyday abolitionists everywhere, and best practice recovery resources in reach of every victim with you. Go and turn to the next one. So anyone can be a victim. Anyone can be a trafficker. This was made for me by victims of human trafficking that I have assisted that in New Jersey, but this can be said of any state. Ages 11 to 14. Let's look at where they met their trafficker at school. In fact, there's a growing scenario, especially in middle school, where middle school and high school students are trafficking other middle school and high school students during class hours. I think I heard it. Anyone want to guess where it can happen without detection? In the bathrooms. In fact, in Newark, New Jersey, the police that work in those locations said, Mandy, the traffickers aren't even going after the high school as aggressively. They're going after the middle school. So this is something that we need to be aware of, and it's not just cities. When we moved out into the country to open a survivor home in rural settings so we could leverage nature to help heal, we ran into a situation where a Girl Scout, a teenager, was being lured by someone who pretended to be a kid that was homeless. And so she was gathering items to help a homeless teenager when her parents intercepted that information. They gave it to law enforcement. They were like, I don't know who my daughter's gonna meet up with this person. We don't know anything about it. They connected that cell phone number to a Canadian human trafficking ring, and it was in this county. And it was rural. So this is where we are right now. If those are watching online, we're kind of in a suburban area, but it was part of this county that was a rural section. So it can happen anywhere, just like that first victim I assisted was in a rural area. So it can really happen to anyone. What really rings true, the most common risk factor is simply being young. The second most common risk factor is having been sexually violated before the age of 18. The current stat for that is 1 in 3 females and 1 in 5 males. And there's a lot happening in our society that is going in the wrong direction, where we are creating systems of early sexualization that create this exact problem. So what can you do about it? Go ahead and turn to the next slide. What can you do? I want to encourage you right now, if you have your cell phone, if you haven't already, all of our literature has this number on it, our website, anything that you all received from us in the programs, all of that information is there. But put this in your phone. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline number and text. Some of our states have their own hotline number. The problem with that is if a victim is outside of the state, that number doesn't work. So oftentimes we'll give a victim, discreetly give them a hotline number, the national hotline number, so that they can self-rescue when they get themselves ready. Why wouldn't a victim be ready to run yet? Well, sometimes the trafficker has their child. Sometimes they're being trafficked with someone they care about, and if they run and that person stays behind, retribution is going to happen. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes they are addicted. And if they are not ready, fully committed to their sobriety, they will willfully return to their trafficker and be worse off. If you've ever seen someone go back to a trafficker, sometimes they don't make it out of that situation alive. So they have to be committed, and they may not be ready. They might have to get some things in order before they run, just like a domestic violence victim, right? They have to get some, so you want to give them that hotline number in discreet ways, and that's what we help you do within your professions and within community outreaches and awareness. Even food pantries, I was talking earlier, even food pantries, those spaces, because you never know what's happening behind closed doors. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. There's some other indicators for sex trafficking I just want to highlight. So what does it look like, right? Because again, a lot of times victims don't know what's happening to them. Sometimes they think they are somehow complicit. So we want to get that message out. It's not normal, it's not your fault, and there is help. And a lot of times a trafficker will manipulate a situation to say, well, actually you did a criminal act under our watch, so therefore we've got you. If you go to law enforcement, they're just going to prosecute you. And so we help them understand what's happened to them, is victim, where they become, they've been subjected to that. And in a lot of states, there are resources to help expunge and vacate the offenses that they have done while under the control of a trafficker. So we help get them resources like that. So they don't have to be afraid to reach out and get help. So some of the I don't know if you guys can see that, but some of the things are like injuries, unexplained injuries. In New Jersey in particular, we've seen a lot of under the hairline, so like concussion, that kind of thing, because the trafficker sometimes doesn't want to mess with the pretty because that's money, right? So we see that. We see branding and tattoos, talking about trades that help. We have tattoo artists that have helped cover up those brandings. And we also see that hotel keys, rolls of cash, multiple phones, or refillable gift cards. Hotel keys, hotel staff, they're one of the areas that have helped us find over 4,000 missing and exploited children in 2.5 years, because we've mobilized them with the faces of the missing children, and they've helped tremendously because they are frequenting hotels. Then we also have unable to make decisions without approval. Oftentimes they don't know where they are. Maybe they don't have access to their documents. And oftentimes they won't even look you in the eye. Someone is speaking for them. It's a very controlled situation. Then there's claims of an older boyfriend or girlfriend. We've even had parents say, man, I thought he was a good guy. He would he'd have her call. He seemed like the best boyfriend ever. Because it's very much they're manipulating the parents as well. And they're calling to say, hey, Mom, I'm going to be out. I'm over here. I'm doing this. And they're not. They're being trafficked. And then also sexually provocative clothes or clothes inappropriate for the weather. We've had victims that were barefoot. Those kinds of things can be signs you think, oh, that's just a troubled person. Take another look. That person may be a trafficking victim, and again, we're not asking you to do something unsafe. We're asking you to give that information, to respond within your profession in safe and appropriate ways. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. Some of those ways we've helped to get the hotline number we're working to get it in every student bathroom in the nation because of what's happening. With 2 other hotlines, in fact, if you're in an in-person location, you can see at the table in the back the information there. But it has the suicide prevention, cutting prevention, and the human trafficking hotline number, because all 3 of those things are happening in student bathrooms. Go ahead and turn. And the other thing I mentioned, to help be part of the ongoing initiative to help find missing and exploited children. Like I said, we've had organizations, churches, businesses, all kinds of people become part of this ongoing initiative. And we have in the in-person locations, we have your state missing children's poster there. You can take it home, you can pray, you can share it with others, you can post it, you can give it to staff in special places, but there are a lot of things you can do. In fact, check out our social media page at can.abolition, and we give mobilization points all the time. If you're a person of faith, every post is for prayer. And part of that are the updates of who's been found and the progress we're making together, finding missing and exploited children. Good turn. So right now we have a panel of experts waiting for us. I want to just show you a highlight video of what we've been able to do in just a few short years together.
Hi, this is Dwayne and Mandy Leverett.
And we are nationally appointed to equip you to do anti-trafficking, including prevention, detection, action advocacy, and survivor care.
So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah. So darkest night, you can light it up, you can light it up, God of revival.
That's pretty remarkable what people have done together, doing things in everyday ways. And again, we don't segregate anyone. We want to make sure the faith community, all different kinds of faith, is part of the solution, and every profession understands how they can impact this issue. Right now, I know we have some guests that are coming on as panelists. So as they come up, I just wanted to introduce each one. Each one of our panelists are going to share a few minutes, give a little bit of a background of what they have done, and then once we are finished, if you have any questions, you can even start putting them, if you are on social media or in different groups, you can put them on a chat. You can write them down, and if you are in person, give them to different people designated. In a moment, you'll be able to give those questions. But we want to make sure your questions are answered. Even ongoing, if you post them on social media, we will do our best to get the answers from our guests. So right now, we have behind me a number of our people. I see your beautiful faces. And so I just wanted to say hi. We have, oh my goodness. We want to just first introduce Derek Marsh. He is a deputy chief, retired deputy chief. He helped create a task force in his county in California, and he has helped develop a lot of resources, not just law enforcement based. One of the areas that he has really been pioneering and championing lately is identifying labor trafficking. And he's part of Vanguard University. They have done an amazing job. One of the first universities in the nation to have a human trafficking major. He actually teaches there as well. And he and Dr. Sandy Morgan and a number of people help run the Ending Human Trafficking book and podcast. And they serve on a regular basis, ongoing, not just their generation, but future generations of professionals of all kinds. At Vanguard University, you can actually get a certificate in anti-trafficking. So I'm not sure if what's happening right now, we will go on as soon as we get them back up. I want to hear from Deputy Chief Derek Wolf Deputy Chief Derek Marsh. But while we wait for our people to get back on, I want to just introduce who's on the platform with me. Everyone that registered should have received a program, and in that program it has the bios of all of our different speakers. But I wanted to just highlight this guy sitting next to me. This is Dwayne Leverett. I happen to be married to him. But he serves in a variety of capacities, but he wants to especially talk to you about human trafficking in the workplace. He has a background in banking and finance. So Dwayne, you want to tell us a little bit about some of the ways that you've, we're, okay. Why don't we go ahead and okay. I'm overruled. So Deputy Chief Marsh, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Thank you so much for being with us. Can you share a bit of what you have done? I know it's extensive, and I'm so inspired by your journey.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you for having me be part of the panel tonight. Well, I started when I was a lieutenant in the Westminster Police Department here in Orange County, California. We did not have any kind of task force, any kind of direction. We actually had a labor trafficking case that initiated our interest and helped us realize we had a challenge here in Orange County. I was able to help co-found with our NGO victim services agency, Waymakers, the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force in 2004. And then we started writing grants, and we started doing investigations, and we started doing outreach, and we started trying to educate people on front lines. And so we were very fortunate to get the grants, to have the opportunity to train folks, and to create materials to keep people aware here in Orange County. I backed out of the task force in 2012 just before I retired, but still work with Waymakers doing training and outreach. Now I'm working here at Vanguard University in the anti-human trafficking certificate, also some criminal justice courses as well. We really have a heart here for prevention, which we feel is often overlooked, because while I laud and I praise everybody who goes out and helps people who've been victims of trafficking, I think it'd be so much easier not to have victims of trafficking as we move forward. So we really have a heart and a calling to reach our young people so they can go out and be armed with the information they have, not just to take it to their own homes, but to spread it to whatever business or whatever callings, whatever missions they happen to go around the world. And I don't want to keep, you were very generous in my bio, so I don't want to get over. It's a great, I'm really excited to be with you guys and share the evening with you. I don't want to take it away from anyone else right now. So I'll pass the buck.
Well, I'm sure there will be plenty of questions for you, and I actually had to trim out some stuff because you have such an amazing bio. So I want to just give one of our panelists here, Dwayne Leverett. He's been working in banking and finance for quite a while, and so you want to share what you have found.
Well, my background is in commercial lending and commercial banking. I'm certified for ABA for commercial lending. I'm a certified commercial bank analyst. I've been a commercial lending officer at several different institutes for more years, over 25 years. I'm currently a independent loan broker. One of the things that happened that we noticed in the early, when we first had the mortgage in 2008, when the mortgages started to go down, one of the things that was noticed was there was what we call bulk leases of properties that were vacant. Really nice properties, because of the bubble and the burst, all these properties were there. The banks were holding them, and they didn't know how they were going to get through it. And all of a sudden, they would get these requests to have a bulk lease, which means that you pay for 6 months up front, and then you take care of it. You don't have to worry about anything for it. And then later, when they were going back, they found that there have been movies or television shows that have episodes. They found that the people had put barricades and locked in, and it wasn't to keep people out; it was to keep people in. So one of the things that I've noticed in banking is in lending is we have the opportunity to understand or see some things that just aren't right. Even though people are coming in and they're showing us accounts and finances and how everything goes, if you start looking at some of the I'm trying not to get too a financial statement technical, but if you start looking at some of the issues, you will find There are opportunities for people to be sex trafficked because of the way things are going, and also labor trafficking. There is a lot of labor trafficking, and the way that the payments are done, the way that, and those who are in the field will understand, the way that their quarterlies are reporting, what have you, and their staff and the amount of their staff, the numbers don't match up. Somebody is doing something wrong. And we have the opportunity in banking for many years, and I'll use more financial services, to look and locate and find out that this doesn't work. This isn't adding up, and this isn't adding up. And we could come in and we could see several times that there's certain industries, and I don't want to go into contractors or even nursing homes or some others, where it doesn't line up with their the cash flow that comes in, and the payments and the payroll that goes out are different. They don't line up. They're not industry standard, and there's a lot of things. And we can find some things along those lines where people are being trafficked, labor trafficked, not just trafficked. One thing about business, we have the opportunity on two ends. We have the opportunity to identify in the very beginning that there's something wrong here, these numbers don't add up, or how they're doing that, and at the very end to be supportive, where we bring people in to train, we bring people in to help them. One of the opportunities we have is we're working with an organization that brings folks in to get their financial services licensing, and it starts from there. But you have people who have been trafficked most of their lives, where they've started from with their children, whatever, and now they're adults, and they have the opportunity to get licenses. They have the opportunity to move forward and have a substantial income, which is a change to what they've been doing in the past. We, as business owners and opportunities, need to see that we have a chance to change somebody's life, not just by giving a job, and we might have to invest a little bit of time and a little bit more training, but the benefit is just mighty there. And those are a couple things that we're working on and trying to get groups together, identifying businesses that we can bring people in. They could be trained, they could be in the right frame of mind, the right attitude with the right people to move forward after they've been through this ordeal. I'm talking too much, so I'll stop.
Oh, that's wonderful. I want to just highlight with what he just said. We look for opportunities for employment and business that can be self-trained or self-paced, I should say, and remotely trained, because a lot of victims typically will see about twice the rates of PTSD as combat military. So when it comes to trauma-based healing, those flare-ups can happen unannounced, and they can begin to, in recovery, spiral out of, go into a bad place if they don't have the flexibility, either if they're in a rigorous education system or if they are in an employment that just doesn't give them that flex. So we look, in some of these fields, we're able to identify, for example, I know there's one of the licensing is a commercial licensing, a state licensing for life insurance and securities.
Insurance and securities, right?
And someone that we've had, one survivor said, I've never had a legitimate job. She was trafficked as a child and then went and got addicted and then started being complicit with her trafficking. And she's like, I've never had a job. I've never had a legitimate job. And so having a path forward and having options that work for them and we can come alongside and take them step by step is really encouraging. Also, we've helped a national bank create anti-trafficking for every department of their bank, from the fraud department with the purchasing patterns and the purchasing patterns of traffickers and victims, but also in their philanthropic purpose, in their funding purpose, and in their education purpose. Again, sitting with some of the leaders and saying, hey, what would it take to have an entry-level employee? What kind of, how can we create that system while they're in the recovery home and get that moving now? It is remarkable the partnerships we've been able to work together to build, not recreating wheels that exist when it comes to banking. ACAMS is they're a great resource. If you work in banking and finance, you can put some information in the chat and we'll send you some, or go to our canfreedom.org and we'll send you some information about how you can, again, get the practical tools to help build that response through what you do. All right, I think, you hit on one of the areas that I see. Sean is up he's with us today. He works in real estate. He's been primarily East Coast. He's way up in Maine now, but you were in Jersey years ago. And just want to hear from you, how has this impacted you and your profession, and what are some things that you've learned?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So my name is Sean McKillop. I've been a CAN advocate since 2018, originally from Manahawkin, New Jersey. I also spent some time in Long Island, New York, and I moved to Maine in 2019 when I married my wife, who is a lifelong Mainer. And I've been a full-time real estate agent since 2015, first in New Jersey, and I'm still selling up here in Maine. It was actually my profession in retail, though, when I had my first experience with a trafficking incident. About 14 years ago, a former employee who worked for me called me and she said she was in a dangerous situation and asked for me to pick her up. After I picked her up and on the drive to a safe place, she told me her story about how she was trafficked in Philadelphia. And at that time, she was still a minor. And as she was telling me her story, it wasn't that I didn't believe her. The story was just so horrific. I just couldn't comprehend it. And that's back 14 years ago, kind of before the term human trafficking is known today. And well before I had an understanding that this type of thing can happen even here in the States. And then about 10 years ago, I had a similar situation happen with a different employee of mine at another retail store I was managing. I was able to bring this second employee to a safe place, but this is still long before my understanding of what trafficking was. And it wasn't until 2018 when the issue of human trafficking was laid upon my heart, I was able to connect with Mandy, and she reminded me of the story when God asked Moses, "What is in your hand?" Mandy asked me, "How can I use my profession of being a realtor to set captives free?" So since then, I've been bringing awareness to other realtors on how short-term vacation rentals can be used to traffic, just like how hotels can be used in the same way. Where I used to sell homes on Long Beach Island, New Jersey, beach vacation rentals is a big part of the island's economy, and how those rentals are being booked has changed over the years with the rise of sites such as Airbnb, for example. And the privacy that vacation rentals give can really allow trafficking to go unnoticed. So if you're a landlord, maybe consider putting a hotline number on your refrigerator or another noticeable area in the house. During the soap outreach of 2019, we handed out soaps to all the hotels and motels in New Jersey with the hotline number on it. You know, just something discreet where a victim can put that in their pocket so they have access to that number. So just kind of wrap up, to all my realtor colleagues out there, anyone who's a landlord, and to all my fellow retail workers, open your eyes and your mind to this issue. Even my ignorance of what trafficking was 14 years ago, God still used me to set his captives free. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know you've also helped to bring awareness to a number of professionals. You've hosted events in your community, not far from the Jersey Shore. And I just want to say thank you to all of those that are on the call or in different rooms today. Congratulations for an event well done. You guys have worked hard to put this together, and you guys have been working hard for a long time building the local abolitionists, all kinds. So thank you so much for what you do. One of the things I want to mention back with what Dwayne was saying is when it comes to human trafficking and the different resources in banking and finance, one of the vulnerabilities can be, debt, accumulated debt, so you feel like you need to just take any job or get additional resources. We don't typically have debt bondage situations with American citizens like you do in other countries or with foreign nationals who are being trafficked in the U.S., but we do have a situation, especially with the economy the way it is, having good sound judgment, getting out of debt, having a pathway forward. I know, Dwayne, you have been helping. One of the financial services aspects is helping people get out of debt. I know you have some seminars coming up throughout the state, and I think even outside of the state, North Carolina is coming up. So if part of that, and also first-time home ownership, home insecurity is a huge issue when it comes to human trafficking. And we have a whole talk we do just on homelessness and how most Americans are just, one injury, one hurricane, one, basic thing away from homelessness. And so for many families, especially young single parent families, home ownership is a pathway forward into not just creating wealth, but creating security from that vulnerability of homelessness. And so sometimes banking and finance and government programs can help get families into that, a more permanent solution. And so those are some of the resources, those, again, we don't have to recreate those wheels that exist already, but bring them into the conversation of addressing vulnerabilities. And also, when we mentioned we mentioned hotels, but when it comes to the travel industry especially, they see a lot of things, and one of the industry leaders for airlines is airline ambassadors. Before airlines had their own anti-trafficking trainers, airline ambassadors trained airline workers just like Laura Soria, who's on our call today. And thank you for joining us. I know you're passionate about this issue. This hits home with you personally, but we want to hear some of those indicators why the travel industry is so important in identifying human trafficking.
Okay, I'm Laura Soria. I am a retired flight attendant. I have been working with CAN and Women since I think 2015, I want to say. I started getting an interest, and being a flight attendant at that time, I kind of noticed that was something that was a passion in my heart. And I said, you know what, I want to know what the airline is doing. So I remember going to one of my trainings and asking, and they do have training. It's called the Blue Lightning Initiative. And they do have like a little course in modulars, but they didn't go the full extent. And I remember asking a lot of questions and saying, you know, these are our children. These are young ladies and young men that are coming into our planes, that are coming from other countries, being transported over here. And we don't know nothing about how to detect it or how to help them. And, you know, they explained to us that we really can't do much, but if we see something, knowledge is power. And if we see something, and they started showing how to just identify it. And it did happen. I remember on one of my flights, I saw a young girl. She was wearing shorts, real short, and where we were coming from, it wasn't something that she should have been. And I kept looking at her, and she was with an older person, but she wouldn't look at me. And so I went to the back and I told one of the girls, and that's the one thing that they tell us, to share everything and see, you know, because as a flight attendant, you can't be just one person just on that person, because they'll get suspicious and we'll lose something. So I had to go to the other person. I said, can you just follow this? I'm feeling this feeling. And you know, another girl went, and then she gave it to the guys in the front. And then we called the captain and we said, you know, we feel that something is different. But the girl, when one of the guys asked the girl for something, she couldn't respond. The guy that was with her was responding for her. And we were like, okay. And the indicators were there. And we were all like, we feel like this is something that needs to be attention. If it's not something, then it's okay. But we cannot just let this girl off our plane without making a comment, without telling somebody, because that poor girl, we're the only hope she has. Well, we reported it to the pilot. He had the Blue Light Initiative Department and the, you know, part of the FBI that they have like an office in the airports, in certain airports. And they met the plane and they were waiting for them as they came out. One of the guys was able to snap a picture of the two of them, and it was sent to the captain, and from the captain it was sent. So they were waiting for them outside. It did happen that the girl was being trafficked. And she was taken, and we didn't get to find out anything else. But just because we all knew something was going on, and we know that planes are used as a form of transporting the kids from one country to another. You know, they get them on these flights, they get them, and they just, you know, they say, just watch when you see a child that doesn't have a phone. And how many kids you know that are 16 or 17 that don't have phones nowadays? So, but this girl, you know, some of these kids that come on the flight, they have nothing. They have just themselves, not even a backpack, and the person that's with them. And that has helped a lot of flight attendants like learn and be on top of it, even for young kids, young boys. It has happened. And as part of the group of the flight attendant ambassadors, we all get together. We have like a website, and we all talk and we tell each other new ways that things are changing. So just communicating with one another, just talking and knowing and showing, even because some people don't even think that human trafficking is really in the airlines. Oh no, that's not happening here. And as we start talking about it, and you talk to this one and you talk to the next one, you're making people aware. And if you do that, that's a change that can make a big difference. And that's what we do. We, even as a retired flight attendant right now, when I talk to some of the girls, I say, how's it going? Is training still doing this? Are they doing the modulars? Are we being, you keep asking, because if you slack off, they slack off. And our kids we can't let that happen to our kids or anybody that's being trafficked. So, I'm glad that I've been part of that. And I'm glad that I've been able that through the airlines and through CAN and doing the soap and doing all these things, I've seen so much that I was even able to share with my family. And it's something that's very important to my heart. And you know what? I think together, speaking, talking, even a 2-minute word or something to just make people aware makes a difference. So let's not stop doing what we're doing.
It really does. And I love that, again, our plan is to get everything systemic, right? So those industry standards, I mentioned Truckers Against Trafficking earlier, airline ambassadors, and then once, again, or ECPAT USA, which is a hotel industry standard, and then those individual hotels and airlines and trucking companies have also taken initiative to require it on their end as well. So that's ultimately to bring awareness, to get specific. We've done teacher professions it's like teacher conference time. We've done teacher profession specific trainings, all kinds of resources. We do human trafficking trainings in the public schools ongoing. Next, I want to focus on healthcare though. Healthcare is one of those fields that people think, well, yeah, clearly, they're going to see human trafficking. It's one of those I don't have to explain how people are interacting with it. And first of all, we have Imelda. So Imelda, I'm going to just volley it over to you. If you can share a bit about your journey in healthcare and how you've leveraged what you do, both as a healthcare professional and as a minister as well, to do anti-trafficking within those fields.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So my name is Imelda Gumeri. I am a State University's nursing faculty. I'm a state hospital nurse practitioner and a church leader in Wayne, New Jersey. So I started my journey back in 2009. I just joined just a seminar at one of the churches that we've been to, and we joined that outreach, SOAP outreach, which is Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. And then back in 2016, we joined the statewide hotel outreach. And then as an adult nurse practitioner, I do not cover children under 18 years old. And back in the days when I was still in gynecology, I remember hearing the doctor I work with having a patient at the age of 10 with a cervical abnormality that is so abnormal at that age. And then later on, they were talking about that girl who is in the spectrum of neurodivergence, that she was actually communicating with at least 37 men, older men, through Facebook. I wish I've known about human trafficking then. Maybe I did something different, because I saw her once. I heard about her many, many times after that. But to this date, I've not seen her. So I just wonder, like, what happened to that girl? And so that started my journey. I have 2 girls and 2 boys. And as you know, human trafficking, sex trafficking is not only for girls. It can also be for boys, or actually any age for that matter. So that kind of, I took that seriously. And so sometime in 2019, I believe, my husband and I went to Hoving Home and did some screening for the survivors there. And from then on, every year, our women's ministry in our church, Oasis of Grace Church, have been ministering to them through giving them like little gifts that they would appreciate. And I thank God for our women's ministry. They have adopted the Hoving Home as their community outreach. So at this point, as a healthcare worker, one of the things that I think we should do is that wherever we are, whether we are working in school or in the hospitals, or for me as a faculty member, maybe I should ask do we have a policy and procedure on how to handle possible victims? And once identified, how are they referred to the appropriate authorities? And programs for re-entry once found. Now, if there's none, then that's not the end of the world, right? That is an opportunity for us today to connect our institutions and networks of influence in programs such as this. With that, I would like to introduce to you my very own daughter, Bernadine, who had picked up this
Before
vision.
you get there, Imelda, I wanted you to say, healthcare is one of those professions, I wanted you to just address HIPAA, that you can't just, report like a regular citizen, right? If you gain information from a client while they're under your health, right, you have certain requirements. Can you explain some of those restrictions and how you can legally report human trafficking in the case of within the healthcare community?
I think victims of human trafficking report violation and compliance with HIPAA is not any different whether that person is being trafficked or that person is a victim of domestic violence or elderly abuse, right? The same policy stand. So I think more so what is important is once identified, what's the next step? Do we have a robust system in place in that institution, whether it's in school or in the hospital, where once identified, they will not be lost. And once they are lost, they are referred to the proper authorities. And hopefully they will be connected to the right programs so that they can re-enter.
So the ways you can legally report, because we have mandatory reporting. Everyone is a mandatory reporter when it comes to children. So what are some of the ways that you can legally report or be part of that reporting in the case of domestic violence or human trafficking concerning HIPAA?
So we actually have, in our institution, we refer them to the social work service, and then they take that on, and they have a system where they will be secluded and then be referred to the proper authorities. Our role as nurses or frontline workers are to identify them and refer them to the social worker and then let them take care of it from then on.
Right. So I know we have a slide, I don't think it's ready now, but when it talks about HIPAA, we have to, there are several different situations. If there's an imminent danger, I know you can report. If it's a minor, you have to, of course, report, but you have to disclose that you're a mandatory reporter. And then also, I know that if it's an adult, you can certainly give them the hotline number so they can reach out for help themselves, but then you also can report on their behalf if they request. So if it's a different situation, every hospital system or healthcare situation is different. So you need to know your facilities requirements, your state's requirements, but how you report that, oh, there it is. How you report that is important. But if someone is an adult and they have asked you to report, they give you information, it's better if it's in writing, but it doesn't have to be. You can, as long as it's charted, it's important that you have that to back you up so that if something comes down later, you've done the proper procedure. So I just wanted to highlight that because some people think, oh, I can just report no matter what. No, different professions have different requirements, and we wanted to just take a moment and highlight that. But going into our next guest, Imelda mentioned in 2009, we had Teresa Flores. I actually had her come out to our church. We were having a human trafficking event because she hadn't started the SOAP project. She hadn't even launched it or shared that vision yet. And because we had all the right people in the room, we helped her launch that. So you may have heard of the SOAP project going forward, but that all kind of came together in that room in Wayne, New Jersey at Calvary Temple in that gym. And what's crazy about that is not only did we help launch that right there, but I had her come in because I wanted to video. She hadn't gotten her story videoed yet, and I wanted to video her story because she was trafficked while living a normal life at home. She'd go to school every day. She lived in a nice, home with a mom and a dad and everything. And her story is exactly how it can happen to anyone's kids. And there was back in 2009, there was such denial. I needed those kinds of stories that we tend to look at people and say, well, that happens to those kind of people. And I had to find the stories so people could look themselves in the mirror and say, oh, it happens to our kind of people too. So we looked for those stories. Again, we should have compassion no matter what. We should, but the fact of the matter is sometimes we just don't learn about things or and they're painful sometimes to learn about and until we actually experiencing them themselves. We want to help get people to the point where they don't have to go through this to care about it or be the resource. It's kind of like when your family goes through cancer. All of a sudden you're experts in these back rooms in hospitals, you know, and you don't want to have to go through that. You don't want to learn about that until you're walking through it. And we would like to spare people from walking through this. We've had situations in our own extended family, and it's just so painful. We would love to prevent these things. And so we brought her in to video her story, and we didn't know she was going to share something that was on her heart, a vision she had, and we helped bring it to pass right here in New Jersey. And then 10 years later, we led the first statewide hotel outreach in the nation, which has a search and rescue for missing and exploited children involved. And so you guys were part of that. And Bernadine, your journey kind of goes way back to 2009, and you were just a young kiddo. Can you tell us about your journey and how you are, what you're doing now, and how that has all come together? I don't know if you're muted or we're having trouble hearing you.
How about now?
Good.
Okay, we're going to. No, my mic is off.
I hear you good. If you can go on.
Sorry, just fixing this up. Okay, can you hear me echoing in the back or no?
No, it's gone away now.
Okay. So, hello, my name is Bernadine Gimmery. I am the daughter of Imelda, and I'm a recent graduate from Montclair State University. I'm pre-med, and I'm currently a senior emergency medicine research associate. So, I remember Sean was talking about how it was in Exodus, God was telling Moses, asking him, what is in your hand? And you know what was in my hand in junior year of high school in 2018? Duct tape. And I used that as a community service project in my social studies class to raise awareness and money for CAN. And I raised a whopping $10.39. Small. But when I remember, since I was in middle school, you were my MPAC teacher. So that was like Church Girl Scouts. And I learned a lot from you about CAN. And when I was still in Calvary, about ways that you are in your hand right now, regardless of your age, to instill change.
Bernadine, can I just pause for a second? I don't know. Can you hear me okay? You're there. I think you're having Wi-Fi connections issues. Can you switch with your mom? I know you're in the same building. Is that possible?
All right, I'll switch.
Okay. I'll give you a second to switch. There we go. That way everyone can hear your story loud and clear. Don't we love technology? By the way, I got to give it up for Pastor Matt here. This is the Hub Church, and it's being piggybacked on, and we have some professionals. We've got Mark in the back doing an amazing job, and a whole tech crew. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's helping not just this location happen, but Bernadine and her mom are also leading another location in Wayne, New Jersey as well. So, all right, Bernadine, go ahead and take it from there.
Hello, is it better here now?
Perfect.
Awesome. So, hello. My name is Bernadine Gimmery. I am the daughter of Imelda Gimmery. I recently graduated from Montclair State University. I'm a pre-medical student, a senior research associate in emergency medicine under New Jersey Medical School. And I have been, I guess, working with CAN since I was 7, because everything that my mother does, I'm gonna follow. And I remember Sean was talking about how in Exodus, God asks Moses, what's in your hand? And in my hand, in the ripe old age of 17 or 16 in 2018, in junior year of high school, I had a cardboard box, pink construction paper, and duct tape, and I used that to create a Barbie doll box as part of a fundraiser for an event that was inspired by, as we saw in the video, you put your children in a cardboard box to show them commodification of humans, of people, especially young girls and young children in sex trafficking. And I thought that was a really powerful symbol. So I used that in my school for a community service project, and I raised $10.39. So we start small. And I officially became a CAN abolitionist in 2021 with my mom, and I work by our young adult ministry using our interest in thrifted clothing, as that became very popular. And that also promotes the idea of where are you putting your money, because your dollar is your vote. And we want to advocate for fair trade. We want to advocate for not fast fashion, because we know that they outsource to third world countries that pay slave wages in order for you to have really cheaply made clothing, honestly. And in 2022, when we started that, our first year, raised $2,000. And then we doubled it in 2023 with $4,000. So we're going to double it again, 2024. I'm really excited for this spring. Yeah. Let's see.
Can you tell us about your capstone project? Because you won like recognition to tell us about that as a student, how you impacted.
Oh, yes. So in 2021, I made my medical humanities capstone project titled Improving Human Trafficking Interventions in the Emergency Department Through Protocol Implementation and Education. So this project was presented at the Indianapolis University, Purdue, in 2023, in March of 2023. And it really brought to light the shortcomings that I saw, because I'm actually a patient sitter myself. So part of ancillary staff, and I worked in all parts of the hospital, especially in the emergency department. And there is a law called the EMTALA Act, and it stands for Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. So this means that emergency departments are mandated to help whoever walks in through those doors. And that includes people who are undocumented, who even have a legal status, who are evading the authorities, who don't have health care. And we know that those people who are at risk of being trafficked are those who are foreign nationals. And a lot of, especially where I work, which I don't think I should disclose. So, but I'll just say that it does have a lot of people who are coming in from Latin America, who don't speak English, who are trying to make a life for themselves, and they're using the emergency department as their primary care. And since interning and working there, I've seen people come in with like really small flus, which is not something that you would usually see in emergency departments, but they are it just really shows that they are seeking refuge here. And not only are they seeking refuge, like, you know, loving parents bringing their children, there are instances in which traffickers and pimps are bringing in the people that they are trafficking to be taken into the emergency department because they're scared, like, does this person have HIV, or this person, like, we abused them too far physically, so we have to see, like, are they still able to work, whether that be in sex or in labor. And in doing the study, I brought to light a lot of the issues that even my own peers and even my own professors were not aware of, going on in the realm of trafficking and how close to home it really happens. Because often people think it's like, you know, it's not people, as you said, that look like us or are in like middle-class communities, but people are getting trafficked out of their middle school, out of their high schools, by their peers, by their families. And it's really disheartening. And I submitted my, what's it called? My abstract for that project, or that capstone, to the Purdue University in Indianapolis, and I was accepted. And I was able to share it there amongst other people who were master's students, people who are medical students, even professionals in their field. And I was able to connect with them and have really engaging conversations with them and be able to even educate people who are professionals in their field on things that they were not aware of. And what was that? I'm also, under the current research internship that I'm working at, I have another human trafficking project, anti-human trafficking awareness project that is analyzing the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, on sex trafficking venue trends from 2018 through 2021 per state. Because as you know, as we've all experienced, we all went online. And my hypothesis is that there was an uptick in pornography consumption. And if there is an uptick in consumption, that means there's an uptick in demand. And that would also mean that people are likely going to turn to the production of pornography, whether that be recruiting young people online, because people are going, especially children and their parents being busy working from home or sometimes being unemployed, they're not monitoring their kids and what they're consuming. And even for, this also goes for adults. So a lot of the time they're being exposed to really dark pieces of the web that they wouldn't have been exposed to previously. And that includes places where they can be groomed. Like, I've seen people being groomed over Roblox. So, which is, it's everywhere, even on Instagram. Yeah.
I have to give props to, so they've really been a very strong community-led church. They're a Filipino culture, but there are a lot of other cultures that are part of their church. And your pastor years ago said, Mandy, can you help our churches in the Philippines do what churches in the US are doing? And I'm like, well, yeah, there's some differences in laws and different things like that, but we can piece together the pieces that you need to have a comprehensive response. And in I think it was less than a year, they opened a survivor home. Then they got attention from their national president. They helped rescue a victim of labor trafficking that was being labor trafficked by the Saudi Arabian government. And it's, again, you just give give people the tools and they run with it. They create their own resources. I know last year at the Attorney General's event in their state, another organization, another church was highlighted for the work that they've done in developing anti-trafficking resources for the deaf and hard of hearing, and also our leaders that have helped rescue and recovery developmentally disabled. What they've found is that the traffickers actually will coach the disabled to put a restraining order against their real support system. So when their loved ones try to intervene, all of a sudden there's a restraining order against them. So again, all of these spaces where professionals and community and churches are running into this space, they're coming up with the solutions. And I just have to celebrate every single one of those online, but also those that aren't speaking in this event, but they're leading those initiatives. And really the church is becoming the hub of community to create this space. And I love that. But Greg is sitting next to me because you're talking about pornography and legislation was mentioned. And so we have someone that works with legislation right here, and one of the bills he's working on touches on what you just discussed. And so I want to just introduce Greg here. And Greg, just tell us about what you do.
Hi, I'm Greg Quinlan. I'm with the Center for Garden State Families. We're a Christian family advocacy organization located right here in New Jersey. One of the first bills that we got introduced, we're in our 8th year now. One of the first bills we were able to introduce, and part of our advocacy, was called the Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation Prevention Act. Now, that's a mouthful, but basically it was based on something that's never been addressed before. And just so you know, my personal experience was I was introduced to porn at 10 years old, and that's when I was introduced to sex. So I understand the lure of pornography and what it's doing to children, what it did to me as a child. Now I know I don't look it, but I'm 65 years old, even though I look like I'm 35. Wanted to let you know that this bill is actually patterned after something that happened in Europe. David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister of Great Britain, was able to introduce this bill. And it's very simple. As you all know, this is a XXX movie theater. And it's available to children. All the child has to say is, I'm 18. That's it. You just have to say, I'm 18, and you can watch the worst of the worst. It's available to them. They don't have to pay a dime for it. And the younger you are, the more titillating and tantalating it is to a child. And then they choose to experiment. So what we did here was knowing that pornography is one of the, as you already saw in one of the previous slides, that is one of the key ways in which children are sex trafficked. It's how they're introduced to it. And then they're used and abused with it. So the way the bill works is this. As you know that you can watch this on anything, any device, whether it's your computer, your laptop, this computer here, known as an iPhone, or any phone, your television set, wherever. In order to access that, you have to have a way to prove that you are truly 18 years of age. Now, how do you do that? You put the onus on the providers. And that's what they've done in several countries in Europe. The onus is on the providers, whether that's Verizon or T-Mobile or Comcast or whoever that happens to be. They would be regulated in making sure that they were able to put blocking software, which now the software is so refined and so clear that he can block anything and everything. All you have to do is put in the right code. So in order to access that, if you prove that you're an adult, we're not making a list, we're not getting a database of who's watching porn, because you have a civil right to do that in the United States, because the Warren Court made it a civil right. It's a free speech act because it is an expression of art, is what they called it. Believe it or not, that was the phrases they used in the case. So all you have to do is then, once you do that, you may have to pay a service fee, say that your service provider says that's going to cost us $10 in administrative fees in order to turn that service on for you. Fine, pay the $10 per device, not for your entire account, per device, so that you can watch all the porn you want. But a child has to prove their ID. They have to prove that they're able to do this. They have to prove that they are truly 18 years of age. And if they can't do that, then they can't watch the porn. In other words, it's another roadblock. It's another wall between that child and the pornographer, that child and a life of addiction with pornography. As you know, the science is clear, and my background is in healthcare, my background is in nursing, that the science is clear. Porn is as addictive as heroin. The same neural pathways that take place when you're having sex are the same neural pathways and hormonal excretions that take place when you're watching porn. Your children, if they're watching porn, that's happening to them, and it's causing them to be addicted. And it's one of the most hardest things to break. Heroin addiction is hard to break. Porn addiction is hard to break. So our goal at the Center for Garden State Families, and with this piece of legislation, which now under different names in other states has been introduced, is clearly for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to protect our children. That's to protect our children. That's what government should be doing, is protecting our children, not interfering with parents, but coming alongside parents to keep our children from being exposed to that thing, that poison for which they could become addicted to. By the way, Andy actually wrote, this was years ago, you actually typed it out and finished it in the car on your laptop, an article about porn is poison that we published on our website. But that's one of the things that are going on right now as far as some of the legislation that we're doing. Then in other pieces of legislation, some of the things you have to look at is the unintended consequences. Whether you agree with the issue of abortion or not, whether it's a right or you don't think it's a right or you don't agree with it, let's put that aside right now and make it irrelevant. Because there's a piece of legislation in this state, and there's a couple of other states that are pushing it through too, where you as a taxpayer will pay for every abortion. No questions asked, no matter where the person comes from to get that abortion, say here in New Jersey. Here's the problem with that. You see, as you know, human trafficking, human sex trafficking is a cash business. You don't use your credit card. You don't write a check. You pay with cash. You pay with the Benjamins, as they say it. So when you do that, it's a cash business, right? So there's this annoying problem in human trafficking circles among these children, is that sometimes they get pregnant. You might pay a little extra not to wear a condom, not to have protection. So how do you take care of this pregnancy problem? You find a provider and have an abortion. By the way, Is not that victim of human trafficking further exploited with this with this surgical procedure, this invasive surgical procedure? So you pay for it, and this person has the abortion, and the human traffickers paid for it out of pocket. Now, should this legislation pass, you in the state of New Jersey will be paying with your tax dollars, subsidizing that human trafficker. That's an unintended consequence. And
Right,
I don't
can
think
I
that's
just-
anything that we want to do.
Can I just interject there? Having worked in service provision for a very long time, I mean, like I said, the first victim I ever assisted was 30, oh wow, there you guys are, good to see you again. It was 35 years ago, but I have, from the experience that I have over the years, I can tell you that almost every victim of human trafficking has stories of abortion. Now, an abortion is a mixed bag because it's looked as a service provision, but it's also looked as a tool of the trafficker. So most of the victims that I've assisted have had what we call forced abortions. That means the trafficker, so the abortion provider, we're helping the trafficker and not the victim. So it's a mixed bag with that, but I've had, in both cases, when they're in recovery, survivors have come into recovery, it is an issue that they have to process that trauma, right? So it gives an even deeper dynamic to the trauma, the other kinds of trauma they suffer. So again, we recognize that there are people that feel very differently on this issue and very polarizingly different. We're not trying to trigger that, but when we are advising, again, the unintended consequence of this, there's a lot of concern in the anti-trafficking community that this will create a safe haven, not for victims, but for traffickers. So that's just one of those things that we, again, all information on the table, it may go one way, the same way, no matter what. But the fact of the matter is, we need to come in with all eyes open so that we protect survivors, that we protect victims, and we have systems to identify. A few years ago, before COVID, we had in one county, there was a lot of, law enforcement and federal and state law enforcement want to get prosecutions because they want to get the traffickers off the street. And so they had this round table of service providers like us and others, and to just say, hey, how can we help you, help the people you serve testify, get these guys off the streets. And so one of those individuals said, well, she was an abortion provider. She worked for an abortion provider. And she said, we are trained not to judge. And so who am I to say? I think previously it was mentioned about, I think Imelda had mentioned about victims coming through the system that had so many adult partners and STIs. And this is what she said, who am I to say a 12-year-old that a couple dozen sexual partners and a dozen STIs is just too much for a 12-year-old, and because we are trained not to judge. And so you see within a system they are denying those common sense, whoa, what's going on here? Because they're trained to do that. And so let's talk about those issues within the systems that exist that are encountering anti-trafficking so we can create a safe haven, so we are helping potential victims. Again, I certainly have my personal views, you have your personal views, and this is something, anti-trafficking is one of the most unifying issues, and so we want to unify even people that see very differently on that issue to help fix systems, to help identify human trafficking, and to respond to it within those systems.
And if I could just add a little dollop. Back in the days when I was nursing, with Florence Nightingale in the Crimean War, back in those, another century. But the fact of the matter is that I look back now, and I've said this in other conferences that Mandy has allowed me to be on, is that I look back now and I remember this patient or that patient and wondered, was that person being trafficked? Because back then this wasn't an issue. We weren't being trained on it. And for those of you who have been in nursing or in the healthcare field, on second shift on the med-surg floor and the madness of that, when your primary care isn't just one or two patients, it could be as many as a dozen, you don't even have time to think about it. And you're in the chaos of an emergency room. Again, there's another issue there where unless you're actually trained and you know exactly what to look for. So I can say this, thank God we have moved forward from where I was in the 80s to where we are now, so that healthcare and the professionals and the professions that are involved in healthcare are now trained to look for this. This is another way it's been a blessing that we've gotten to this point, that we are able to train people to know exactly what to look for.
All right, and if you want to find out about bills that are that have application to human trafficking in your state, we also mobilize on forced child marriage and changing that so children are protected. There's a lot of states still that have a child.
We did that in New Jersey.
There's no minimum age. Only 10 states have shut the door on that, and when you have a 10-year-old forced to marry, there's no question there. So we're working on that legislatively. So again, we share that information on social media. If you want to learn about these topics, we certainly share those broadly. Again, that's a form that we identify as modern-day slavery. It's not part of the federal law. So I want to just kind of like bend to a happy place. One of the things that I wanted to highlight, and I love this, because when the arts come in, don't the arts make us happy? We love music. We love, I mentioned the tattoo artists. We had our pottery artists that would come in and do therapy. One of the top pottery artists in an artisan magazine in her state, one of the top pottery artists by that artisan magazine, and she would come in and do art therapy with clay and all kinds of things. But right now, we have someone with us that, Dave, you want to just shout out what you're doing using humor and drama. Now, in the past, we've highlighted some of our different, our network that does like a trauma-informed drama to help kids have a voice. And it's remarkable. They've done it here in the U.S. and they've done it overseas as well. Arts really kind of are our common language, and this is a heavy issue, but when you can bring joy and laughter that helps heal, that's amazing. So, Dave, you want to take it away and tell us what you and your wife are doing across this country. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, it's an honor to be here, and it's encouraging to see so many different facets of business and people's walks of life coming in to fight this war against evil. And so, as you said, I'm doing something unique. Since 2018, I've been teaching improv classes to survivors of sex and human trafficking in Chicago. And that was only on a part-time basis. And then in 2022, we felt the Lord move us to full-time. So we were expanding beyond Chicago to South Dakota, to Dallas, to Sarasota, Florida, and a bunch of places in between. And we're not going to just perform improv and try to make the survivors laugh. We're actually teaching improv, basically improv 101 classes. And what it's doing is breaking down a lot of the walls, because in order to survive that literal hell on earth, a lot of walls have to go up. The heart has to get hardened. Parts of their personality have to be stifled in order just to make it, because sometimes hope can be very dangerous, and in my experience, survivors have just put up those walls. Now, when we come in, we encourage them to participate in silly improv games, silly name games. There's a game that I love called Bippity Bippity Bop, and if everybody there in the church can say it with me, Bippity Bippity Bop.
Bippity bop.
Everyone's smiling. It's a silly game, and it's a communication game that teaches you to listen to understand as opposed to listen to respond. And as we start breaking down these walls and working on communication, and also tapping into creativity, as you said, the arts are so healing, because you can express things through arts, whether it's improv comedy, painting, singing, whatever it may be. You can express things in a way that you can't normally do in just regular conversation. And so for the last 5 years, I've had the blessing of seeing women get free and completely transform from the time they walk in the building to the time they leave, because they get to shed their burdens, they get to laugh, they get to be in a place where there's no judgment. And just seeing women who've come in carrying the burdens of the world shed those burdens and laugh like a 9-year-old girl again, it's been such a blessing, and we're so excited that God has opened the door for us to do that more. And part of the reason that my wife is joining us is she kept hearing all these women were getting to spend time with me. She got jealous, so now she's going to start joining me doing these things. But it's an absolute joy, and we have so many testimonies and stories of how lives have been changed just through God using improv.
And I mean, there are whole scientific studies about how laughter heals you inside and out. I know you found this through your own journey, struggling with depression, and how for a lot of people, there are a lot of comedians that are hilarious, but it hides their depression, right? But this has been a tool for you going forward to help bring healing, not just to others, but to yourself. And so it's remarkable. I'll give you a couple seconds to just wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent many years, over 17 years, battling depression, and I used comedy as a way to mask it. And it is very similar, like you said, a lot of comedians, they feel like if they can make somebody laugh, they're justifying their existence, because otherwise, why am I suffering? Why am I struggling with this depression? And now, God is redeeming that, and all those years lost to depression, He's redeeming it. I'm able to now. There's like sensitivities and awareness that I have now that I wouldn't have had I not gone down that path. And it's a joy to see how me just bringing I'm like the little drummer boy, just bringing what gift I have, and seeing how it can be used to help others. And to anybody watching or listening, I encourage you, find your gift and you can help serve others as well. And you probably do it in a way that no one else would have thought of, but He's got a plan.
Yeah, I have a slide. I don't know if you guys can pull up that slide of that superhero slide with the balls. All of our professions, even ones that weren't represented today, all of our professions really, we deal with secondhand trauma. We're serving people who are hurting people, and how you take it on yourself. And if you've ever seen this movie, The Incredibles, this super guy figure goes in, takes out the monster, and what got him, what immobilized him, were all these little things that stuck to him and then inflated, and it literally immobilized Superman. And I love that picture. Maybe I'm very juvenile in my mind. Maybe that's why I love the arts. But the fact, it's a perfect picture of how secondary trauma sticks to us, and how we have to have spaces of accountability to get rid of those minor things. Because you hear a story of a kid that's been molested, and you get offended on their behalf. Now you've got a fence stuck to you. And you have to process that the same as if it's yours. Therapists, they debrief each other for that purpose, because it builds up. Law enforcement, you talk about people that deal in high trauma. We have to have systems and accountability, whether therapists and destigmatizing that. We want to be healthy and whole. We need to bring self-care, soul care into this conversation for every profession, and that's one of the things that people want to get involved in anti-trafficking, and they usually will tell me one of two things. They'll say, Mandy, I can't. I know, I feel it. I want to, but you'll hear two things. You'll hear either, I know myself. I will be a puddle of tears on the ground, and I won't be good to help anyone. I'll be depressed. I'll be immobilized. Or I'll be like Dwayne, who's in the jail a lot doing chaplaincy, in addition to all the things he does. But I'll have to start a jail ministry, because if someone hurts a kid, I'm going to kill that person, and then I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be good for nothing in jail. There's only so much I can do except for jail ministry. So those two extremes express the exact thing that we talk about. You have to process that. And everyone we train in anti-trafficking, whether they're a CAN abolition advocate or we're doing professional trainings, we insist, we highlight how important that is, whether we're nursing or whatever it is that we do, because we all run into people who are hurting and broken, and we hurt and get broken on behalf of them. And we're compassionate, but we also have to be self-aware. And so that's one of the issues that we address proactively. I know that in first responders, for example, a lot of times there's high divorce rates and all these things that are really directly impacted by the trauma that we're facing. So just wanted to highlight that. And Pastor Matt, talking about superheroes, if you guys were part of our statewide hotel outreach, he was the guy that made the video in the Superman suit, and it is my favorite video to this day. I'm gonna put it back on social media so those that are watching can watch it. But talking about, as a pastor, how you've come into human trafficking, how you've identified it, how you've used what you do professionally to help build that response. Can you speak to that for a few minutes?
Bippity, bippity bop. It works. It works. Thank you very much. So first of all, Mandy, thank you so much. As a pastor, you've heard this 3 or 4 times tonight. what's in your hand. Use what's in your hand. And I've been grateful to use the resources of this church in order to support this ministry of setting people free. We have done soap outreaches, the state soap outreach, seminars, teachings such as this, as Human Trafficking 101, to bring awareness to people. Two very quick stories for you. When I was pastoring my first church in Middlesex, New Jersey, Greg, you were only 14 at the time, I know. And so we had a young lady who had been a customs agent. Mandy, like you said, sometimes it's not people we'd even imagine would get caught up in this. She was a customs agent in Hyderabad, India, and an American man came, romanced her, married her, brought her back to the States, and she was locked in a house for over a year in human trafficking. We had dropped a flyer in the mailbox, and she saw that, or in the mail slot, she saw that, and she showed up at the church, and she told me her story, and frankly, I couldn't even believe her in her story. I made a couple of phone calls to make a very long story short or longer, depending on how you look at it. We had a family that took her in. She could not go back. She was afraid for her life. This man actually used the INS and her status of citizenship against her. She could not go back to India. Her family had rejected her. And so nevertheless, we were able to get a hold of an organization, some advocates to help her. We helped her with her citizenship. We helped her to also get over what had happened to her with the trafficking. She was able to get some training. Today, that woman is the vice president of a bank here in New Jersey. And I want to encourage you that there is life after this. If someone will just open their mouth, if someone will just do something and say it's none of my business. The second thing, second story. Mandy, I know this is the one that you asked me to talk about, and I really feel this relates to all of us. I was at the Rockaway Mall, and I was just studying for a sermon a couple years ago, and I was at the local Starbucks, and there was a young lady in front of me, and her phone just kept going blip, 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 and it's like someone was harassing her on her phone. I saw the pain in her face, and she's responding. Every time she goes to put the phone back, it makes another noise. It rang. She wouldn't pick it up. And I looked over her, she looked at me, and her eyes went up in her head, and she literally fell into my arms. Talk about God sending you someone, right? I mean, literally fell into my arms. And so I sort of dragged her over to a table, and we were on the line at that point, and the woman behind the counter got some orange juice, and we tried to revive her, and she revived, and I'm trying to talk to her. She didn't speak English. Thank God for the Google Translator. I used Google Translator on my phone, and we began to talk back and forth, and she said, well, I'm ashamed of what I've done. And as we went on, she had a family back, I believe it was Peru, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, what country was in South America. And anyway, make a long story short, as we continued to talk, two men showed up, and they kept the distance, and they were a little further away, and I finally said to her, are you being trafficked? And she just looked at me, and she looked down at her phone, and she looked out, and I didn't notice it the first time, and I asked her a second time, are you being trafficked? She looked at me, and she looked over, and I saw those two men standing over there, and she would not answer my question. And I said, do you want help? And she would not answer that question. The two men came over and they said, oh, that's where you are. We were worried about you. I said, well, she passed out. We've helped her. Well, we'll take it from here. They would not let her talk. They would not let her respond. They were doing all the responding for her. And so it seemed to be, based on what we had talked about and what we had seen in our last 101 that we went through, I think this woman's being trafficked. And so one of the resources we had was Kayla Munez of the FBI. We called Kayla up. Kayla came in and they investigated it, and they said, sure enough, she is being trafficked. The sad part of this is there was very little they could do about it because she was not willing to talk at all. She said she has every sign of being trafficked, but there's very little we can do. But they identified a business that was doing trafficking. And so I still feel there was something that we were able to do that was positive. You never know where you may run into someone or someone who may run into you or literally fall into your arms. And you never know what you can do to help someone who might be being trafficked.
Thank you so much. I want to, as we get ready to ask some questions or receive questions for our guest speakers, I wanted to highlight something that wasn't, so if you have any questions, you have something to write it down, or you're ready. I know we have, in this house, we have someone with a microphone where you are. I just want to get our teams ready to receive questions. One of the things that, talking about airlines, we've actually had airlines on the flip side help give donations, helping survivors get home. We had a situation with a Southern Missouri victim lured in by a fake fiance, came into our local airport, and then we had to get her home. And we work with also the airlines to help get her home. So again, not just identifying victimhood, but using your profession to help recover resources and recover victims of human trafficking. And one of the things, as we go into our question, I want to highlight Deputy Chief Marsh, he is part of a webinar really that talks about human trafficking, and one of the things that was highlighted was a University of California study that identified, that was survivor informed, and identified 6 categories of human trafficking need, and survivors were answering, what do I need to overcome human trafficking? What is the most important thing? And of those 6 categories, they were things like safety, security, housing, food, those kinds of things. Do you know what was number 1? Number 1, that the survivors said, number 1, what we need is employment, education, and income. And we had already scheduled, when that study was reported this summer, we had already scheduled this event focusing on what we do, and part of that is bringing survivors employment opportunities. So the timeliness of this conversation is confirmed by academic studies at University of California. I love that. I was shocked that was it. I figured housing and security, and most people do, but it was a means to self-support. And that makes sense, right? Because human trafficking recovery isn't a small thing. It's a lifetime, right? And so you need a pathway forward so you're not in a vulnerable situation again. And so with that, I want to just invite our different communities. We've got some online questions, and we've got some questions in the audience. If you're here in the audience or there in an audience, make sure you raise your hand if you have a question, and we will field all questions that we can. And then if the speaker that you're addressing is no longer on the call, we'll make sure that we get that question to them. And on social media, where we're sharing this as well, we will continue to answer those questions. So no question is too little. So what do we have as far as questions so far?
So our first question is, our first question is, as a staff member in an elementary public school, what can I do?
Staff member in an elementary school. Anyone want to hit at that one first? We didn't have educators, but I think that Deputy Marsh might have something to say about that. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mandy. I think if you're working at a school, you're obviously a primary reporter. You don't have a choice. You can't make a promise. You're not going to disclose what was disclosed to you. You have to think of the child's well-being over what they consider what their well-being may or may not be. The best idea is if you have a task force, to contact the task force contact, because they'll have more understanding what trafficking is and is not, and how to approach it with a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach as far as interviewing or interacting with the child. If you don't feel comfortable with law enforcement initially, another way of looking at it is you can go to your local victim services agencies, and almost all of them have some kind of human trafficking support as well. Though, from a police perspective, I'd love it if you called us, but I understand how sometimes victims can be overwhelmed when somebody walks in the door with the guns and the vests and the whole 9 yards. So it may not be the best first approach to make.
Awesome. And I would say also with the national hotline number, you can definitely use that, because it is tooled with, again, it's a nonprofit that runs it, but it's connected to law enforcement specialists in every state, and then the service providers identified in every state. So I don't know if that question, what state that was in, but most states have a task force of some kind. So there is a strong response. And again, in states that don't have a strong task force, we're helping to build that as well. So I know Deputy Chief Marsh, you actually helped build a task force there, and so it takes law enforcement, but it also can be community initiated as well. And legislatively and funding and all those pieces come together. Another question?
No.
Oh, wow,
We're
not
good.
another, oh, wow,
We've had a few, they were answered.
They were answered
Yes.
within the conversation. Well, that's
Yes.
wonderful. If any of our panelists have questions, we're certainly available. You guys have questions for each other? All right. Well, I think it's interesting when a survivor is found, that to understand, we celebrate the finds, right? But it's important for us to recognize that the path forward, the real heavy lifting of human trafficking is in the recovery. Some of that includes residential service provision, but it also includes ongoing healing at home. So, for example, when a child is trafficked and then they are recovered, oftentimes they can't just return back to school. Your world has changed. So your education path changes. Your needs-based change. So it's important for us to kind of think through a different lens. There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to healing trafficking. And one of the things that I heard several times from our panelists in various ways was almost like a professional regret when we didn't know, right? We didn't have the tools. I've sat on panels over the years with law enforcement specialists, especially, that just learned, and their whole approach changed from really criminalizing victims, which they didn't identify them as victims. So they were doing best practice as they understood it, but then learning, wait a minute, they're a victim, and now the policy has changed, and to learn we've been doing it wrong all this time. Same with healthcare. We've had situations where survivors have straight up said, this happened to me in the hospital, and the testimony of nothing was gathered because everything was botched in that situation. Again, we've come a long way, like was mentioned, but there is that sense of, nobody wants to feel like they did a bad job. Everybody goes to work to feel heroic, not to feel heroic, but you want to have purpose and meaning in your life, and you want to do good in this world, and to think, we were doing it wrong, right? And so there's a lot of that, and so we need to give each other grace. That wasn't intentional, right? That was a professional, lack of a victim-centered approach and a survivor-informed approach. And so as we are learning, right, legislation is changing, our responses are changing. Maybe some of our prejudices about certain kinds of people are changing. Like the hospital situation with the teenager I mentioned, she'd been drugged and sold states away, and she'd just been rescued, and she was out of her mind, and she was traumatized, but had also been forcibly taken drugs, because the drugs can be a chemical restraint, and they also can be a use of control. And so the hospital staff that she ran into just looked at her like, what a waste, another 16-year-old druggie. And here, they had no idea what she went through. They didn't take her seriously, and she wasn't in a situation where she could have safely responded. So again, we want to do well with what we have. Did I see a hand back there?
Pastor Mandy, we do have another question,
Okay.
and Tori's going to.
Keep them coming in.
What are your opinions with massage parlors? I would imagine women are trafficked as therapists. ?
So I know I'm going to let the law enforcement answer this, but I will throw in a 2 cents here. One of the things that we've been able to do with municipalities, so when we're talking about the brothel situation in the local strip mall, and everybody knows what's going on, but nothing's being done about it. A lot of times there's not enough information to be actionable and prosecutable. A lot of times those are groups of foreign nationals that can't get that information out. And so it's a very unique situation. So one of the things we've been able to help municipal leaders do is build a response based on, if you can't prosecute, well, maybe you can create fire codes and health codes that make it prohibitive for them to operate in your municipality. And the more municipalities that we do that with, then it helps really eliminate that municipality after municipality. So an example of that would be like a sink per bed, right? Or a sink per table, right? That would make sense in a spa, but it becomes prohibitive financially in a brothel situation. So I'm going to let the law enforcement, let Derek go ahead and take that one, because I know you have a lot of perspective on that.
Yeah, we had in our city, we had a high Asian population. 38% of our 90,000 people were Asian, predominantly Vietnamese, and massage parlors were a major problem for us, a challenge.
We
I should
just
say.
lost you. I don't know if you can hear me, but we're going to try to
I
get
can
you
hear
back
you.
up
Can
in
you
just
hear
a
me?
second.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Got me
You're
back?
back, Derek. Yeah, appreciate you.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So anyway, we had lots of massage parlor cases. And number one, I want to say not all massage parlors are human trafficking dens of evil or anything like that. Number two, so don't feel guilty if you get a massage, and it's okay to do that. Number two, though, we had one where we had a place where law enforcement and the city council would go to this cafe all the time, and above it was a massage parlor, and on the face of it, it looked like a legit massage parlor. That a secret door, literally, where you would go back, and that's where the sexual activity would occur, and no one was the wiser. We had to get people informants to tell us what's going on. The other places they hide are like chiropractic clinics, where chiropractors will sell their name for a business, maybe go there one day a month, but the rest of the days, it is actually an ongoing sex trafficking massage parlor type of a situation. And finally, the other kind of massage parlor is not really a part of a residential brothel, where they actually go to different residences. They rent these homes 2 to 3 months, switch over to another place. And it's almost kind of like what you see with drug trafficking, but with the people staying a tad longer. And then you could have gangs taking care of it, or just it could be a mom and pop kind of operation, if you will. But yeah, there are a lot of different ways that massage parlors can be abused or misused and take advantage, especially what we found predominantly of our foreign national groups. Not necessarily, it was not always our local American citizens that would be taken advantage of, in my experience.
Great input. Now, in that, what are some of the key fields of employment that would have seen things and should have seen things in those different instances you've given?
Well, number one, like one of the massage parlors that we went to, they were literally being supported by insurance companies. So there were insurance people that could have literally gone and done inspections at this location to determine what type of actual activity was going on, as opposed to just taking them at prima facie value. Obviously, there are checks that the different cities do to make sure that the business licenses that they have.
Get you up again to finish answering that question.
Okay.
While we're waiting for them to come on. Okay. All right. So we're back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, okay. I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So, yeah, they're like in the city, there are different code enforcement people that should be taking checks to make sure things are being done. There are also laws, like you were talking about earlier, that can restrict who is allowed to have a massage parlor, who isn't allowed to have a massage parlor. And a lot of it has to do with like partnering with those agencies so that everyone's can be consistent, and there are safe places that they can have some kind of stamp of approval or a writ of approval that shows it's been checked. The people there have been verified as being legitimate masseuses, and and what their product is, it shouldn't be suspect or capable of any kind of criminal activity at that point.
All right. Now, Dave, did you have something to add? I thought I saw your hand go up.
I was just going to comment that that's been one of the things that is a common thread here in Illinois, is that it seems like almost every month or every other month there's a story of a bust within a massage parlor where there's been people that have been doing that nefarious behavior behind the scenes, and it's prevalent around the country. It's not just it's in the rich suburbs as it is anywhere else.
Right. I agree. In fact, talking about real estate again, those Insta brothels, especially like if there's a Super Bowl or a big event happening in nice areas like Franklin Lakes or whatever, like you can throw it up really fast, and it's kind of this high-end place where wealthy people hang out, and so it's not just certain kinds of neighborhoods. So I want to just are there any other questions before we close up?
There is one other question, and it looks like this one is for Derek also. And it says, Derek, were the majority of victims of labor traffickers in Orange County of Mexican descent?
Well, the quick answer for that is no, they're mostly, there was a mix, Hispanic and Asian, because that's the majority of our demographic here.
What Asian? I know there's like Cambodian, Filipino. What Asian?
Keep going. If you pick anywhere Pacific Islander, and you're pretty much in that, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Saipan, Guam. Philippines. We had Chinese folks. We had actually Chinese brothels going on. Hong Kong. We had people from Hong Kong. We got at one point. We've had Orange County seemed to be a kind of a melting pot because it's just below LA. It's kind of a halfway place, and it's also listed as being very fluent. So when you're in that world where you have a high possibility for affluence, you have a lot of chances for people to show up and try to garnish money from people looking for sex trafficking. Now, for labor wise, same idea. The idea here is more, we don't have a lot of like open fields for migrant workers, but we had people, I heard someone mention earlier, I think it was your husband, mentioned the idea of having people in elderly care facilities. We had a lot of Filipino people being abused in that sense and being labor trafficked there. People who are working nights trying to do cleaning in different like business complexes, in hotels, construction workers, restaurant workers, a lot of those types of activities going on as well.
Right. All right, are there any additional questions? Oh, we got one right here.
I'll come to you.
Elaine is coming with the mic. Oh, Bernadine has a question? Okay. Bernadine, go ahead with your question and we'll get the other question in a second.
Hi, so we do have some people who are alive in our facility as well. And we have some high school students and they're very curious about this. So in combining all three of them, how does human trafficking enter a high school and how can teachers combat it? And also what can students do on their part because they're not adults, they're not really in the workforce, but they want to get involved.
Right.
So
I'll say, just reiterate what we said earlier, is that kids have been trafficked in the student bathrooms, but that's not the extent of it. On the flip side, what can students do? We've had students in New Jersey and in other states as well start whole nonprofits. Again, bring awareness that evades detection of traffickers for them. Sometimes they're part of legislation even though they can't vote. So there are a lot of different things that they can do. And so talking to a youth group, sometimes that church will bring us in, or we do talks in schools, we do talks to groups of students all the time in colleges, and hearing their perspectives. Again, what's in their hand, like you were talking about what was in your hand. By the way, I got to give props to Shared Hope. The doll box was there. We copied them on that, and they did an amazing job. But yeah, so, and one of the other areas, because pornography is a huge issue of every generation, and so not engaging. Again, talking about Shared Hope, they have an organization called Defenders my husband has been part of for a while, and one of the things that they said early on was that for many people, learning that the victims in the images weren't free at the time helped them get free from their porn addiction, right? So those really obvious areas are point, like chocolate and coffee and and pornography. Like, we can really change these things by our own behavior, and our own freedom is really tied to other people's freedom.
Okay, some of the panel answer the
question.
question.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
One of the things easy to do is the 800 number. You can leave an anonymous tip if you see something, and that number, they'd rather you be wrong and it not be human trafficking than you say, it's nothing, and not leave the number. And so that's something that some of the, they can leave an anonymous tip if they see something, they have more specific information about it, to do something without. And a lot of people don't want to start nonprofits in their high school. They don't want to do a lot, but they see something, and they want to do something, and they want to be that person so that they can do. And going back real quick to the massage parlor thing, another thing that can be done is a lot of times a property is not owned by the business operating in it. And so Sean can probably talk to this a little bit, but getting the landlords to put certain requirements in, having a regular health code check, having a certain amount, understanding what's going on and seeing how it's going on, checking that. A lot of companies now, when I say companies, banks won't even lend if they see this type of business. This is one of the businesses they stay away from. So a lot of times you're going to have alternative issues go in there.
I'll tell you too, a 5-year-old came up with an idea. She noticed the messaging on grocery bags and mall bags changing for the holidays and different things. And she learned about, January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and January 11th today is National Human Trafficking Prevention Day. And so she learned about that, and she said, well, what if the businesses change their logos, like they have Christmas logos, and what if they put the national hotline number on for January? Would they do it? And she started calling local grocery stores because labor traffic, everybody goes to the grocery store, right? And she got, and one by one, she got different companies to do that. Now, if you're in a state like New Jersey, they've done away with the bags, so it's kind of a moot point. But that started with a 5-year-old who noticed something, who had a little bit of awareness, who spent some time in a doll box and brought awareness, which, by the way, that doll box experience is like a human-sized doll box, and it's not to depict human trafficking accurately, but for a lot of people who were in denial that didn't get it, that was their aha moment. They see a teenager standing in a box, and they're like, this is real. And for someone, and I have to give props to Shared Hope, because they're the ones that did that first in DC. And I said, that is, for some people, that is going to be the moment they get it. And so, again, that's just one example. I don't know, Derek, if you've run into some situations where you've worked with students and they've really pushed the bar forward.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the reason why I got involved with Vanguard University. We actually have a group called Live to Free that Dr. Morgan helped develop that actually goes out to high schoolers and middle schoolers and talks about the risks of being exploited, what those vulnerabilities are, and tries to like walk them through, and sometimes with theater and through like examples to help them understand, because we all know peer-to-peer education is a lot more effective than some old guy like me walking in a classroom saying, shame on you. They're going to say, hey, what's that guy know? He doesn't live my life. But when other peers are talking about it, there's a lot better chance for the message to be heard and then further to be acted upon. And I was also typing something in the chat about iLab. It's the Bureau of International Labor Affairs. They actually have an application that anyone can download on their phone. And it actually talks about areas where different products that may involve labor trafficking at some point of their production and or processing. It might help people in different schools to be able to choose what kind of school products we'll use, like the chocolate you were talking about, or the coffee. In our world, Trader Joe's is a place that has a lot of, fair trade issues. So, I mean, a lot of different ways to participate without putting yourself in danger, right?
And I have to say as well, we've had students do quite an amazing job. Oh, we have another question? I'm sorry. Good. Okay, we got the question? I'm sorry.
That'd be me.
Okay.
Yes, the question that I have is, how do you get to the root cause of this problem? I think, Ken, it's a wonderful thing, and you're, taking care of these young women and young men that are coming out, and girls and boys that are coming out of this. But I think we were talking earlier about supply and demand. So in the case of the massage parlor, in the back room, there are things that are going on, and there's a supply, there's a demand for it. What happens to the individuals that are actually partaking in this and purchasing these services that are causing a lot of these problems? Are those people being prosecuted as well?
I think Derek could probably share a bit about that, but legislatively, one of the most effective models is what's called the Nordic model, and it criminalizes the purchaser. And that has flipped the outcome, right? Because you do away with demand, you do away. Of course, that's sex trafficking, but that has been a very effective model. I don't know if Derek or others have something to share about that.
The supply and demand is always the issue. I know Texas has made what used to be a misdemeanor a felony, and that's changed quite a bit, because people who were like, oh yeah, it's no big deal, even if I get caught, I go and it's like playing a car ticket. Now it's you have a felony record on you. So that was one of the big things I know that Texas has done. And I'm speaking from the business side. On the labor side, it's kind of hard, because a lot of times you wouldn't know that you are the contractor, somebody in a elderly care facility. They're the ones that are actually paying for it, but they don't understand that they're paying for it. They don't know, so it would be kind of difficult. You might have to deal with some management, but you'd have to have some laws in place. And I believe we have some that would be more on the aspect of how you're financially paying people. You're not paying them properly. It would be considered the same as paying people under the table. And so there's a lot of different things that happen there. But to your point, yes. That's the way you would stop it, is when you take away the demand and the supply will dry up. And so you have to figure out a way to take away the demand to really do it.
We advocate legislatively for that approach. Unfortunately, some states have taken away the criminalization of the act, and then but they haven't added the criminalization of the demand, right? So essentially, it legalizes it because they don't, do the switch at the same time for both sides. So there are a lot of aspects to this, and solving it is it's a very broad approach. And when we talk about building a comprehensive response, it's one step at a time. It's one piece of legislation at a time. And it's not just one group is doing one thing, but we can kind of work with everybody to build that together. And when specifically for your question, Bernadine, what can they do today? A student can ask their teacher, hey, why don't we have the hotline number in our student bathroom? And then your teacher, your school can contact us, and we will send you the number you need to get that information there. We will send you for free speakers that will train in your schools, and curriculum that's already created that from 821 and other partner resources that we work with that's excellent. You don't have to have extra class time or budgets, that kind of thing. And the Pray, Share, Find initiative, those posters, I can't tell you how many students have helped find missing and exploited children just like themselves. I was doing an outreach in Oklahoma, and I actually had a hotel staffer that we were given the poster to, and she's like, I used to be one of those kids on that poster. So the very target, the kids themselves, right? One of the highest targets actually are some of the greatest advocates, and you don't have to wait until you're older. So I just want to put that out there. And young people are so creative. All the spaces that they love to be in can be leveraged for freedom, including gaming and all that stuff.
I have a question.
Do you need my note?
I have a question real quick. And it's just for each of the panelists. In 2 sentences, tell me what you think the greatest effective way we could move, or the greatest need that you see, something like that, just to each of the panelists. And I'm going to start with, who do you want to start with?
Let's go, Sean. What do you think that is an important part of this conversation that you would like to highlight more?
I think the idea of human trafficking is, when it comes to Hollywood, we glorify it. Movies like Taken and stuff. We want to be that guy that kicks down the door and kills a bunch of bad guys and rescues the victim. But unfortunately, that's not how it works for individuals like us. When I went to rescue the first girl, I didn't understand about human trafficking. I put myself in a bad position, not knowing exactly where I was going. And I could have put her in a bad position too. Now, this is all before I had the understanding, like you were saying before. It's like, we wish we had these understandings. And I don't regret any part of it. But now with the glorification of it, we want to go kick down doors and do that kind of thing where it's really, we're putting people at risk. So use what's in your hand. And a lot of actually the second instance with the second girl, we went to the police, but she wouldn't talk to them. We were in the police station, and she just froze up. And I think law enforcement is doing a better job now because we're having a better understanding. But I think at that point, she only saw herself as she didn't see herself as being the victim. She was afraid that she was going to be seen as the problem. So I guess just kind of sum it up is, Hollywood glorifies it, but that's not what all of us are called to do. So if you see something, definitely report it. Yeah, that's what I think.
I would say on my end, building trust. Building trust is kind of so important in all aspects, including working with different systems. Dave, what do you say?
For me, I think that the biggest need is to get people to realize that this is real and it's evil. Just not to glorify the news cycle, but with the Epstein thing that's going on my Facebook feed, I see all sorts of joking about so-and-so being connected. And it's like, no, that's not funny. We're talking about children who were raped. And I'm being very blunt right there. Children were raped, and we need to take it seriously as a society and realize that it is evil. There's no excuse. There is no reason for this to still be happening in our day and age. And we need our social media friends to take it seriously because we've seen that they're very effective in deleting the messaging that they don't want out there, just to be blunt. So why can't they stop trafficking that's happening through their platforms the way they stopped other messaging from happening? So we have to be serious, and we have to also vote with our dollars, vote with our eyes, take away the marketplace, because because we have softcore porn, let's face it, on our network TV shows every week. If we stopped watching it, they would stop producing it, which becomes a gateway for so many people. So I think those are the biggest things that there's. It's a hard issue, and we as a nation and as a society have to change our heart.
Bernadine and Imelda, just a couple words each.
Yeah, I would say the same way that we ask what's in your hand, let's look at where we are now. We don't have to look too far, just start where we are and be intentional about it. We know that January is the awareness month. We have a year from now to be intentional about it, and hopefully we will have a greater reach. And this time I think as a faculty, I will be more intentional in among students. I will be more intentional in the high schools where my children are. I will be more intentional in the hospital where I work, and hopefully from one hospital that will spread to other hospitals.
Bernadine and Derek, I'll give you the last word, and we got to wrap it up. I know it's 9:20. You guys have done an awesome job.
So for me, coming from the perspective of research, we have to reach these institutions and the public where they're going to listen, and that's through testimonials, statistics, and other forms as like hard evidence. Because there are even, like, I've heard stories of people who are even lawyers, they're like, it's not real. And I'm like, I'm not sure where you're getting that information from, because it's like there are people who are very much impacted by this. And a lot of the time there are people who are like my age or younger, and we have to empower them through knowledge. And actually somebody from in the Q&A, they asked me to send them my the presentation that I presented at Purdue. And if anybody else wants it, I am happy to give my email to share it with you, because that's one of the ways that we can reach our institutions through education.
Can you share it on our social media too, or send us the information so that others that have a question, we can put it in, in the comments for this event? All right, Derek,
Yes.
you want to close us up with the last thoughts, the very wise thoughts of all the work you've done?
Okay, I think it really comes down to accountability. I think we have to hold each of ourselves accountable for our actions, our thoughts, our behaviors. We have to go back to our families and hold our loved ones accountable, and be very clear about what's acceptable, unacceptable when it comes to manipulating, exploiting other people and treating them and objectifying them, and the dangers of doing so. And you need to do it to your friend groups as well, even though it may be counterintuitive, may have some peer pressure involved. But we need to let them know that their behavior is not acceptable, and to spread it that way. I think eventually that's what builds the momentum to change. I love all the things we do, and I think they're great. Awareness and everything, those are all important. But I think until we get into the home and get the individual to just accept responsibility for what they're doing and try to do something about it and hold others accountable, then we're going to be in a rough spot for a long time.
That's good. I appreciate it. I want to just give a big thank you to all those involved in all of the locations. And I also want to remind people that are in the state of New Jersey that are getting credit, make sure when you check out, you fill out that evaluation completely, because that is your completion, and all of your credits will be applied to your account going forward. So thank you all for being part of this. Thank you, Pastor Matt, and so many churches that have helped do this multi-site simultaneous event. And go toward freedom. And we'll put additional information in the chat connected to the Facebook page and the YouTube page, so we can continue this conversation. Again, our social media is at can.abolition. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.